Good afternoon, Anthony Boccanfuso, Executive Director of the University Industry Demonstration Partnership in the United States.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your attendance and thank you very much for your participation in the University Industry Interaction Conference in Amsterdam.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed the conference and the interactions.
We have a couple of questions for you. And you've been mentioning these days that your organization mainly deal with big universities in the United States and big companies in the United States. So I can imagine that that's one type of cooperation. But what would be the difference between what you are doing and someone that might try to get together small universities and small businesses?
Well, the larger companies and larger universities typically have more of an infrastructure to support collaborations between companies and universities, whereas the small companies and the small universities tend not to have as robust an infrastructure and frankly the assets and skills to support the collaborations from an administrative perspective. And so, when you're dealing with a small company, the CEO can be the chief technical officer, the chief scientific officer. His attorney probably handles their real estate transactions, their contract negotiations, issues around employment. So the depth of knowledge in specific areas is typically more difficult. And you see the same thing on the university side. They may have one person that does industry agreements, but also handles licensing issues. And so those skill sets sometimes are different, and therefore it's more difficult for a smaller company or a smaller university to negotiate with someone on the other side who maybe has a greater number of human resource assets.
And another question concerning the United States. I was wondering if you're seeing or if you're witnessing what we are witnessing in Europe, which is a change from a more university business relationship focus on patents and license to a higher focus in relationships. Is that something just that it's happening in Europe, or do you also see that in the United States?
No, absolutely. I think that trend is global. I don't think it's just in Europe. And if you look at the companies and universities that are working together now, the ones certainly that are getting a lot of attention, you see larger companies wanting to go deeper with fewer universities. So many companies now have a strategic set of universities that they work with. And of course, by doing that, they're taking dollars that may have been invested more broadly across a greater spectrum of schools and investing those deeper to have deeper relationships and try to increase the return on investment from those relationships. And so I think that trend's going to continue. And the question then for a university is, how do you get to be one of those strategic partners for a company where you can then do more than just sponsored research? I don't think licensing, frankly, is much of a factor. Workforce development is still the number one reason why companies want to work with universities. And therefore, when you think about that issue and the wide scope of relationships that can exist between companies and universities, I think that trend is going to continue, where patents are certainly not as important as perhaps people perceive them to be. Licenses the same way. Sponsored research will continue to be an important activity, as well as co-creation, where companies and universities come together to create ideas to then work on collaboratively, rather than a university going to a company and saying, this is what we think you would be interested in.
So that aligns with my last question that I'm asking all our participants, and is, how do you see the future in this area? How do you see university-industry relationship in, let's say, 10 years?
Well, I think we kind of touched on the last question. I think you're going to see more physical co-location of university and company researchers, going from basic research through product development, and you're going to see a lot of the issues that those raise, like conflict of interest, addressed differently perhaps, so that there'll be a consensus that these relationships are actually high value and also provide benefit to both parties, and as well perhaps to the public that support them.
Okay, thank you very much for your words. Hopefully next year and also the year after and also the year after, I have the possibility to re-interview you and we can review these issues and see how university-industry relationships are going. So thank you very much for your participation, thank you for your words, and I hope you enjoy Amsterdam, I hope you enjoy our conference.
Well, thank you for having me, I look forward to coming back.
Thank you.